In chapter 28, we're going to be covering the reproductive system and especially continuing on with that endocrine chapter, talking about specific hormones. The functions of the reproductive system are things you would probably automatically think about. So making gametes. And what are gametes? Those are the sex cells for humans and animals, so the sperm cells in males, and then oocytes, or more commonly called eggs, in females. It's also involved, though, in fertilization and enhancement of that. So, for example, in males, there's nourishment of those sperm until they mature. So it's not like they are just making the sperm, they're also supporting them by providing nourishment. And then the female reproductive system allows that transport mechanism for the sperm to be transported to the fertilization site. Also, in females, we get the development and nourishment of a new individual. So talking about the fetus developing in the uterus, as well as milk production by the breasts. And then finally, again, relating to that endocrine system, so making reproductive hormones that get produced to allow for the reproductive system to develop, as well as for the development of various body forms and structures. So looking here at the major organs of the reproductive, so in the male, so we have the seminal vesicle, the prostate gland, testes, penis, epididymis, and the ductus deferens or vas deferens. So we'll be learning more about those here in just a minute. And then we'll continue on to the female with those mammary glands to produce milk, to provide nourishment and development of the newborn, the uterine tube, or ovary, uterus, and vagina, looking at some of the major organs. And before we get into the males, just a quick little bit about meiosis. So cells divide either by mitosis, which creates genetically identical cells that are called diploid. And diploid just means that they have two of each chromosome. So we have two chromosome ones, one that came from our mom and one from our dad. But in meiosis, which is more what we'll be focusing on here in the reproductive system, meiosis is division for sexual reproduction. And here we're taking one diploid cell, again, one that has two of each chromosome, and we're going through 2 rounds of cell division to produce 4 genetically different, what are called haploid cells. So again, mitosis, we have genetically identical diploid. So we're going from diploid to diploid. But in meiosis, we're taking that diploid cell and dividing it twice to decrease the number of chromosomes. So we only have 1 of each chromosome, and that's referred to as haploid. So those gametes that we're making, the egg or the sperm cells, are haploid. Then during fertilization, when they fuse together, we restore that diploid state, and mitosis allows for development after that. We will focus more on the anatomy of the male and female in lab, but I do want to touch on it just so that it's kind of all in one place. So if we look at those parts of the male reproductive system, of course we have the testes, and then a series of different ducts, so the epididymis, the vas deferens, and the urethra. There are various accessory glands like seminal vesicles, the prostate, and bulbourethral, as well as some supporting structures like the scrotum and penis. And looking at both of those a little bit more, the scrotum is that 2-chamber sac that just contains or holds the testes, separated by what's called the raphe. And then we have the dartos, and the cremaster muscles, and those are going to regulate temperature because sperm, as we'll talk a little bit later on, like a lower temperature. So that's why they're separated and kept more outside of the body for a cooler temperature. And then the perineum, this is a diamond-shaped area between the thighs. It has the anterior urogenital triangle, that's where the penis and scrotum are, as well as the anal triangle in the posterior region. So if we just look again, we'll be covering this more in lab. You'll be identifying and labeling these parts. But again, just looking at these major parts, of course, the penis, but here's that scrotum that contains the testes, again, keeping it a little bit more away from the body, we have this series of glands. Over here, we have various ducts that are going to be involved in allowing sperm production and ejaculation. Now this male perineum, again, kind of these two triangle regions, so the urogenital triangle and then the anal triangle there as well. Now if we look at the testes, so these are small oval-shaped organs, but again, their main function is for that sperm development. That's where they're going to be made. Again, as I mentioned already, they're kept kind of outside of the body to keep a little bit lower temperature. That's important for that development to occur. That's why males that are experiencing some fertility issues, some of the first steps is just trying to increase development. So, wearing looser fitting underwear so that it's, a little bit cooler, allowing kind of airflow just to keep that temperature down and to help with that sperm development. Now, the testes are both exocrine and endocrine. Again, exocrine means that it's creating something like an enzyme and it's secreting it. So in this case, the testes are secreting cells, which are the sperm. So they're making sperm cells and then secreting or releasing them. But they're also involved in that endocrine or the hormone system because they produce testosterone. Now the covering around the testes, we have the tunica vaginalis. That's that kind of original peritoneum. The tunica albuginea. And this is some connective tissue that goes into the testes and is divided into lobules. And those are called seminiferous tubules and also Leydig or interstitial cells, which ultimately are what are secreting that testosterone. So again, endocrine part is that release of testosterone that happens there in the seminiferous tubules and the Leydig cells. Then the tubes that allow for that sperm to move are the seminiferous tubules, as well as we have the tubula recti and the reti testes of the efferent ducts. And this is just a pathway, that transport that takes us to the next duct, which is the epididymis. So just looking here again, we'll focus more on this in the lab part, but our seminiferous tubules, again, some of those ducts there that are going to allow the movement of the sperm to the epididymis. So moving from the testes, from the where it's being produced through there. And again, we're going to have the different layers here, like the tunica albuginea, which is where those Leydig cells and the seminiferous tubules lie. Just again, looking at this a little bit more. So again, the interstitial cells are Leydig cells, which are actually making the testosterone. Or here we have some spermatogonia. So we're going to look at how the sperm actually develop from these spermatogonia. Right, so this process of producing sperm is called spermatogenesis. Name kind of goes along there. So these spermatozoa are made in those seminiferous tubules. So just a few terms here. So those spermatogonia, those are the germ cells. So these are diploid cells. So we see them starting here. So those spermatogonia are going to divide by mitosis. So they are creating genetically identical diploid cells, and those are called daughter cells. So they're also referred to as daughter spermatogonia. All right, now those primary spermatocytes, they're going to divide instead of mitosis. Those primary spermatocytes are going to divide by meiosis. And there are 2 rounds of meiosis. So that first round is going to separate chromosomes, and that's going to create secondary spermatocytes. So we see here our secondary spermatocytes. Well, then they go through a second round of meiosis, one more round of division to further separate that DNA or the chromosomes, and they're going to create these spermatids. So you're going to create 2 secondary spermatocytes. Both of those divide to make into 2 to give us a total of 4 spermatotids. Okay, well, they're going to go through development to produce an acrosome right at the tip of the sperm. So it's going to be right in this region here, right at the head, called the acrosome. And then they're going to develop the tail, which is the flagella, to allow them to move. Now, we have what are called Sertoli or nurse cells, also sustentacular cells. These are going to nourish those sperm cells. They also form the blood-testis barrier as well, not as impermeable as like the blood-brain barrier, but again, creating that barrier there, as well as producing a hormone binding globulin. And then finally, again, those interstitial cells are going to be in there. They're going to help produce the testosterone that's there. Those cells are going to convert testosterone to what's called DHT, dihydrotestosterone, and estradiol. And those are the active hormones that cause that sperm formation. Now, some of the ducts, we already kind of looked at them at the picture, but just looking more at what they're doing. So the sperm cells in the seminiferous tubes move to the tubula recti, to the ret testes, and then efferent ductules, again, meaning going away, they're ultimately going to lead to that epididymis. And the epididymis is where the sperm cells are going to mature. Now the stereocilia. So cilia, again, we think about like the GI system or the respiratory system with those kind of hair-like projections that stick off. So this is pseudo-stratified, so it looks like it's layered, but it's actually all connected at a basement membrane. So those are attached there, and it increases the surface area that helps for absorption of fluid from the lumen. So again, nourishing and supporting, keeping the sperm nice and hydrated so that they can develop properly. Then the ductus deferens, or the vas deferens, more commonly called. This is just passing from the epididymis to that actual abdominal cavity. We also have the artery, testicular artery, and the venous plexus. We have some lymph vessels, we have nerves coming in, and we have all of these coming together to form what is called the spermatic cord. So this combination of arteries and veins, some lymph, some of the ductus, and then also the walls here have smooth muscle that allows for that peristalsis like we saw in the gut, just the beating of that allows movement. Here we're not trying to move food, we're moving the sperm that allow for ejaculation. And then our ejaculatory duct, as the name implies, this is actually going to connect the vas deferens and the seminal vesicles, and it ends there at the urethra within the prostate gland. And then our urethra extends from the bladder to the penis to allow that passage of both urine and those reproductive fluids like the sperm. And then just again, putting this together, we'll come back more to this in lab, but just, putting it here so you can kind of visualize where everything is moving through. Again, we have this spermatic cord made up of these ductus deferens, the testicular arteries and veins, as well as the nerves coming in there. So again, all of these coming together to create that male reproductive structure. Right, looking now, moving into the penis, so the function, both urination as well as allowing for erection and ejaculation of the sperm. We have 3 different columns of erectile tissue that are going to be filled or engorged with blood to allow the erection to occur. We have the corpora cavernosa, and there are actually kind of 2 of those. They expand at the base to form what's called the crus, and they're attached by ligaments. And then the corpus spongiosum, there's one of those that is the surrounding spongy urethra to form the bulb. And then the root there of the penis is called the bulb. Then the glans penis, that's the enlargement of that corpus spongiosum. And this kind of the top of that, or the foreskin, is what covers that glans penis. Again, circumcision surgically removes that piece from there. And then we have that external orifice of the urethra. Again, cover more in lab all the different parts, but just to kind of visualize, sometimes it helps to imagine the parts. Again, we have two of the corpora cavernosa, and then that one spongiosum that's there. And then here at the end, again, that glans penis, again, we can have that foreskin over that can be surgically removed during circumcision. Now, some of the accessory glands that go along here with the males, we have the seminal vesicles. This is where most of the semen is made. I'm not going to ask you the exact number, but again, the majority of semen is made in the seminal vesicles. It also has fibrinogen and a high pH. Okay, so it's going to have this high pH is very basic, and that again is going to help with the nourishment at this point. That needs to be neutralized though before it enters the vagina, or then things go wrong. So we'll come back to that. The prostate glands, about 30% of semen is going to be made here. It has a more of a milky secretion. Again, pH is still high. We have some clotting factors and some fibrinolysis that's happening. And then finally, the bulbourethral glands, just a little bit, very small portion of the semen being made there. Some more mucus secretions, and this is right before the ejaculation to kind of secrete and coat the sperm as they leave, as well as to neutralize the pH. So again, seminal vesicles and prostate keeping that basic kind of high pH, but that's not good once it enters the female vagina. So the bulbourethral gland is going to help neutralize that pH. All right, and then just kind of ending this part talking about the physiology, and again, kind of back to the hormones here. So regulation of those secretions. So at puberty, the gonadotropin releasing hormone increases, and that's going to cause an increase of luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. Those get released, and the follicle stimulating hormone promotes the sperm formation. The luteinizing hormone, these levels promote those interstitial cells to produce testosterone. So we get sperm formation and the release of testosterone. And then inhibin gets secreted by the sustenacular cells to inhibit that follicle stimulating secretion. So we have positive and negative regulation occurring. And at puberty, what's happening here, so right before birth, the placenta secretes human chorionic gonadotropin hormone, CGH, and that's going to secrete testosterone by the fetal testes. Now, from birth to puberty, there's no stimulation, no testosterone being secreted, but then at puberty, which is between 12 and 14 years, that's definitely variable. This is where sexual reproduction becomes possible. And right before that, there's just small amounts of testosterone from the adrenal gland right above the kidneys. That's there to inhibit that gonadotropin releasing hormone. Then at puberty, the pituitary gland is less sensitive to that inhibition. And so then the amount of gonadotropin hormone releasing hormone increases, which then increases the luteinizing and FSH hormone. Again, FSH stimulates sperm production. The luteinizing hormone is going to increase testosterone. Now, the effects then of testosterone, again, most of this made from those interstitial cells of the testes, a little bit from the adrenal glands and the testicular, but most of it coming from the testes. And the effects, again, just most of these are probably things you would think about, but we have enlargement and differentiation of the male genitalia. We have sperm formation, as well as the descent of the testes. So the dropping of those is required. We get a little bit more hair growth, like facial hair starts to occur in that skin, and the hair gets a little finer or a little more coarse. And this is due to an increased amount of melanin, so a little bit darker And then also we're getting sebaceous glands or sweat glands. This is whenever boys start needing those deodorants because they're starting to get sweaty and stinky. The hypertrophy or the enlargement of the larynx that causes the voice changes and kind of the squeaky voices that we hear as puberty is occurring. An increase in metabolic rate, so typically weight starts decreasing, becoming more a little less fat, more muscle due to that increase of testosterone. And protein synthesis, of course, this is why it is used as a steroid to increase muscle formation and body builders, because testosterone is what increases that protein synthesis. And we get that rapid bone growth as well as the closure of the epiphyseal plate.